Okay, so, with all the focus usually on the top NFL draft picks,
Mm.
right? Something pretty interesting happened a bit further down the board.
Oh, yeah.
Shedeur Sanders. Huge name coming into the draft, lots of talk. He gets picked by the Cleveland Browns in the 5th round.
5th round. Wow. Yeah, that definitely makes you sit up. Because, let's be honest, viewership probably dips a bit in those later rounds, usually.
Exactly. That's what it was.
Okay.
So our mission here is to pull out the key points from that chat. Why the pick felt unexpected, what Sanders started doing in Cleveland almost immediately, and this whole developing story around his image after all the talk before the draft.
Yeah, that sounds great. That transcript should give us a good snapshot of how people were processing it, kind of in real time almost, which is always valuable perspective, I think.
Okay, so let's start with that surprise factor.
Yeah.
Even the people in the discussion we looked at, they admitted they weren't exactly glued to the TV by the 5th round.
Understandable. Draft fatigue is real.
Totally. One person said something like they weren't glued to the TV for every second here now, which, that captures it perfectly, right? How people generally view those later rounds.
Yeah, it does.
So what does it tell us that Sanders' name suddenly pulled everyone back in?
Well, it really speaks to the power of, individual star power and the narratives in sports, doesn't it? By round 5, yeah, a lot of casual fans might figure the main excitement is over. But Sanders, he brings an instant new storyline. Suddenly, people are paying attention again, focusing on the Browns, wondering what's happening.
There was even that funny line in the discussion about calling the very last pick Dr. Kavorian because everyone's just exhausted and ready for it to end.
Huh, yeah, I remember that. It definitely sets the scene.
So Sanders being picked was a genuine moment that, cut through all that tiredness.
Yeah.
But then it didn't stop there. Almost right away, he's out in the Cleveland community.
Yes, that move to show up at John Marshall High School so quickly, that's interesting. Seems like a very deliberate first step, wouldn't you say?
It does, making an immediate effort to connect. What's your take on that quick engagement?
His message was pretty standard stuff, right?
Yeah.
Work hard, have purpose.
Make good choices, yeah.
Yeah.
All positive reinforcement. But then he comes out and says his goal is to bring Cleveland, of course, the Super Bowl here.
Bold. Very bold for any rookie, really, let alone a 5th rounder joining a team that's, still chasing that big one.
And definitely ambitious.
But maybe smart, too. Cleveland fans are, incredibly loyal. They've got that long history. Making a statement like that, even if it feels like a long shot right now, it can forge an instant connection. Shows he gets what the city wants.
Yeah, shows he understands the vibe.
It's an interesting look at how players try to sort of win over a new city right off the bat.
And the discussion in our source material, it kind of touched on a bigger idea here, too. This notion that a player getting involved in the community can almost be seen as, justifying the public money that goes into these teams.
That's an interesting angle. Adds another dimension beyond just, the on-field stuff.
Right, the broader impact.
It definitely does. When players are active and positive off the field, it absolutely strengthens that tie between the team and the community that supports them financially and emotionally.
Okay, now, we got to address something that was definitely buzzing before the draft. This perception of Shedeur Sanders being maybe a bit entitled or too flashy. Our source went right at it.
Yeah, and what's fascinating is how strongly they defended his character, suggesting that, despite the image, people who actually know him say he's a good human being.
Right.
They even floated the idea that maybe he was just unprepared for the draft process itself, maybe didn't get the best advice on how to impress NFL teams.
That's a really interesting point. Coming from college, where he was the big recruit everyone wanted.
Exactly.
He wasn't ready for how the draft flips that script. Suddenly, he's the one who has to actively chase and impress the teams. It's a total 180.
It really is. The skills you need when you're the prize are totally different from when you're basically in a job interview competing against hundreds for just a few spots. It's a tough switch.
Yeah, not everyone nails that transition smoothly.
For sure.
And they used that analogy, didn't they? A job interview with 32 potential bosses really makes it clear.
It does.
The discussion also pointed to specific things that fueled that brash image, comments he made about not being the guy for certain teams.
Right, and his father's comments about things like combine testing and stuff.
How much weight do those moments carry for teams looking at a prospect?
Oh, they can definitely raise flags. Teams are making huge investments. They want talent, obviously, but also guys who are coachable, good teammates. understand the professional environment.
So perceived arrogance or not wanting to do the standard stuff.
Yeah, that can put teams off no matter how talented you are, especially if there are other question marks.
The transcript also made a really key distinction, I thought, between Shedeur and his dad, Dion, pointing out that Dion's talent was just off the charts, like generational.
Right, which gave him a different kind of latitude.
Exactly. Leeway that Shedeur, who's still developing, doesn't necessarily get. That feels like a crucial difference.
It absolutely is. A truly undeniable top-tier, can't-miss prospect might get away with more in terms of how they present themselves. But for someone who isn't universally seen that way, those perceptions about attitude and approach become much, much more significant in the evaluation.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But, there was also this undercurrent of optimism in the discussion, a sense that maybe this whole experience, getting drafted later than maybe some thought, in the 5th round, could actually be a good thing for him, a turning point.
Yeah, potentially. Sometimes facing a bit of adversity or maybe not having things handed to you quite as easily can be incredibly motivating.
Like adding fuel to the fire.
Exactly. It can bring humility, drive, that need to prove people wrong. It could really sharpen his focus on development, on fitting in, on working even harder.
And speaking of positive signs, however small, they mentioned he already has the highest-selling jersey among all the rookies drafted this year.
Wow, really? That's actually pretty significant.
Isn't it? What do you think's behind that? Just the name recognition.
It's probably a mix, right? His huge profile from college, definitely. The excitement of a new player for the Browns. And maybe even fans wanting to kind of embrace him, push back against some of those pre-draft narratives.
Yeah, like he's our guy now.
Something like that. It creates instant buzz, a real connection between him and the fans right away.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up for you. This deep dive into the whole Shedeur-Sanders situation, getting drafted by Cleveland in the 50s, it really highlights a few key things, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
First, the pick itself. Genuinely surprising, and it definitely reignited interest when maybe things were winding down. Second, his immediate move into the community in Cleveland suggests he's keen to build that connection quickly.
Yep, proactive engagement.
And finally, this ongoing discussion about his character, the pushback against the pre-draft labels, with some suggesting maybe he just needed better guidance through that whole process.
Right, the context around the perception.
So hopefully diving into that discussion has given you a bit more of a nuanced picture than just, reading the draft result headline.
Absolutely. It's a perfect example of how the draft is really just the starting line, isn't it? The story, the perceptions, they keep evolving way after the names are called.
Totally. Okay, so here's something for you to think about after listening. Considering everything we've talked about with Shedeur Sanders landing in Cleveland, the surprise draft spot, getting out in the community right away, the whole debate around his pre-draft image, what do you think will be the biggest factor that decides his success there, both on the field and off it? Is it going to come down to pure talent, his mindset and how he adapts now, that connection he builds in Cleveland? Or maybe something else entirely? What's the key ingredient, you think?